Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I have to vent about this because I feel like I'm going to lose my mind if I don't. My friend's family has been in the worst shape for the past 5 years, and his HOA has been making everything 10 times harder for them. It all started just before the pandemic. My friend's family welcomed their second child who was born with special needs. His wife had a complicated pregnancy and had to stay in the hospital for 3 months. Their newborn son was in the hospital for 9 months due to various health complications. Just as they were beginning to cope with these challenges, his wife lost her job because of the constant need to be with their child in the hospital. Then the pandemic hit, putting an even bigger strain on his self-employed business. As if that wasn't enough, just as the pandemic restrictions started lifting, their son was diagnosed with leukemia. The family was already stretched thin, emotionally and financially, and this diagnosis pushed them to their limits. They were in and out of hospitals constantly, dealing with treatments and medical bills piling up. His wife couldn't go back to work because she had to take care of their children, especially the one battling cancer. My friend tried to keep his business afloat while also being there for his family. It was a nightmare. Now, you'd think in a community with an HOA, there'd be some understanding, some compassion, right? Wrong. His HOA has been relentless. They threatened to start proceedings to take his home because he hasn't had time, resources, or money to power wash the algae off the side of his house. And get this, it's the side that doesn't even face the road. When he tried to explain the situation to them, telling them about his family's issues, their response was cold and heartless. They told him he should probably sell his house and move into more appropriate dwellings. Are you kidding me? Sell his house and move where? The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in our area is now 150% of his mortgage payment. And that wouldn't even be big enough for his family. They need the space they have, not to mention the emotional attachment and stability that comes with owning their home. Moving isn't just impractical, it's impossible for them. The sheer audacity of the HOA to suggest such a thing blows my mind. My friend and his family are fighting just to keep their heads above water, and these people want to drown them over a bit of algae. My blood was boiling as I prepared to pack up my power washer and go clean his house for him. If I were slightly more petty, I'd stop by the HOA president's home and draw a giant dick in their driveway with my power washer. So one Saturday morning, I drove over to my friend's place with my power washer in tow. I spent hours scrubbing the side of his house clean. It was the least I could do. While I was there, I saw the toll everything had taken on him. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His wife was trying to keep a brave face, but the strain was evident. Their home, which should have been a sanctuary, felt like a battleground. As I worked, neighbors came by and some offered their help. It was a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. We managed to clean the algae off, and the house looked better, but it felt like a hollow victory. The HOA might back off for now, but the underlying problem remained. They were heartless and disconnected from the reality of what this family was going through. Days turned into weeks, and the HOA continued their harassment. They started nitpicking other minor issues. A patch of lawn that wasn't perfectly mowed, a fence that needed a new coat of paint. It was clear they were targeting my friend, trying to force him out. The stress was unbearable. His business suffered because he couldn't focus, his wife was at her breaking point, and their children, especially the one with leukemia, needed stability and care, not more upheaval. Eventually, things reached a breaking point. The HOA filed a lien against their property for unpaid fines and dues, despite knowing full well why they were unable to keep up. My friend tried to negotiate, but the HOA was unyielding. They wanted compliance or they wanted them gone. One evening, my friend called me, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to do," he said. "They're going to take our home." He was defeated. We brainstormed, trying to find a way out, but every option seemed like a dead end. The legal fees alone to fight the HOA were more than they could afford. In a desperate move, they started a GoFundMe campaign, hoping to raise enough money to pay off the fines and get the HOA off their backs. The response was overwhelming at first. Friends, family, and even strangers donated. But it wasn't enough. The fines kept piling up, and the HOA seemed determined to squeeze every last penny from them. The stress took its toll on their health. My friend ended up in the hospital with severe anxiety and stress-related issues. His wife was struggling to hold everything together. The community, which should have rallied around them, was largely silent. People were afraid of the HOA. afraid of becoming the next target. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't keep up with the demands. They missed a mortgage payment, then another. The bank wasn't any more understanding than the HOA. Foreclosure notices started arriving. The dream of owning their home, the stability they desperately needed, was slipping away. One day, the inevitable happened. They lost their home. The HOA had won. They were forced to move into a small, cramped apartment that barely accommodated their needs. The kids had to change schools, adding to the turmoil. The stress and upheaval took a significant toll on their health and well-being. Watching my friend and his family go through this was heart-wrenching. The cruelty and lack of empathy from the HOA were astounding. They destroyed a family over trivial, easily solvable issues. It made me realize how broken and merciless these systems can be, prioritizing rules and fines over human lives and well-being. In the end, they had to start over from scratch. My friend's business never fully recovered, and the emotional scars from the ordeal remained. Their story became a cautionary tale in our community, a stark reminder of what can happen when an HOA loses sight of compassion and humanity. I live in an HOA neighborhood, but my house isn't in the HOA because my grandfather, the previous homeowner, never joined when the other neighbors created it. This has been a constant headache for me, as the HOA board keeps trying to force me to join. They come to my house, tell me I need to join, and try to manipulate me with documents and various scare tactics. Every time, I slam the door in their face and tell them to F off. But recently, things escalated. The HOA board members came to my house 3 times in a single week. Each time they were more insistent, claiming they could force me to join the HOA. It was infuriating. I have my rights, and I know I'm not obligated to join. Yet they were relentless. The last time they came, I'd had enough. When I saw them approaching my porch, I felt a surge of anger. I grabbed my shotgun, marched to the door, and opened it with a sense of finality. I pointed the gun at them and told them they had 10 seconds to get off my property. Their eyes widened in fear, and they scrambled away, not looking back. Since then, they haven't dared to come back. However, I've heard rumors that they're considering pressing charges against me. It's laughable, really. I know my rights, and in Texas it's perfectly legal to protect your property. But the situation has got me thinking, can they actually do anything? And how do I get these persistent assholes to finally leave me alone? After that incident, I decided to take some steps to make sure I was on solid legal ground. I contacted a local attorney to get some advice. I wanted to know if there was any way the HOA could legally force me to join, or if I had crossed any lines by brandishing my shotgun. The attorney was reassuring. He confirmed that since my property was never part of the HOA and my grandfather didn't sign any agreements, they couldn't force me to join. As for the shotgun incident, he explained that in Texas, I was within my legal rights to protect my property from what I perceived as a threat, especially since they were trespassing and harassing me. Feeling more confident, I decided to take some preemptive measures. I installed security cameras around my property. This way, if the HOA board members decided to show up again, I would have video evidence of their harassment. I also put up some no trespassing signs to make it clear that they were not welcome. Despite my precautions, the rumors persisted. I heard through the grapevine that the HOA board was indeed planning to take legal action against me. They claimed I had threatened them with a deadly weapon, which, in their view, was an overreaction to their visit. It was absurd, but I knew I had to be prepared. One day, as I was working in my garage, a police car pulled up to my house. 2 officers got out and approached me. They explained that they were there because the HOA had filed a complaint. I calmly explained the situation and showed them the security footage of the HOA members trespassing on my property. The officers watched the video and then took my statement. After reviewing the evidence, the police agreed that I was within my rights. They advised me to get a restraining order against the HOA board members to prevent further harassment. I took their advice and filed for a restraining order the next day. The judge granted it, and the board members were legally required to stay away from my property. With the restraining order in place, the visits stopped. But the HOA wasn't done with me yet. They started sending threatening letters, claiming they would sue me for damages and legal fees. It was an empty threat, but it added to the stress of the situation. I kept all the letters as evidence of their continued harassment. Then, one evening, I received a call from my attorney. He informed me that the HOA had indeed filed a lawsuit against me. They were claiming that I had caused them emotional distress, and that my actions had put the entire neighborhood in fear. It was ridiculous, but I knew I had to take it seriously. I gathered all my evidence, including the security footage, the letters, and the documentation of their repeated visits. My attorney and I prepared for the court battle. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with a mix of nerves and determination. The HOA board members were there, looking smug and confident. The judge listened to both sides. My attorney presented the evidence, showing that the HOA had been harassing me, and that I had acted in self-defense. The security footage was especially damning for the HOA. It clearly showed them trespassing on my property and refusing to leave when I asked them to. The judge seemed unimpressed with their claims of emotional distress. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. He dismissed the HOA's lawsuit and ordered them to cease all attempts to force me into their organization. He also instructed them to stop all forms of harassment against me, warning that further attempts would result in severe legal consequences. The ruling was a huge relief. I felt vindicated and finally free from the constant pressure of the HOA, but the victory was bittersweet. The whole ordeal had taken a toll on me. It had been stressful and exhausting, and it left me with a deep distrust of my neighbors. Over time, the HOA's influence in the neighborhood began to wane. Other homeowners, seeing how the board had overstepped their bounds, started questioning the HOA's authority. A few even reached out to me, expressing their support and apologizing for the board's actions. Some of them were considering withdrawing from the HOA themselves, inspired by my stand against their overreach. I continued living in my home, maintaining my property as I always had. The experience had changed me, making me more cautious and wary of authority figures. But it also made me more determined to stand up for my rights and protect my home. In the end, the HOA's attempts to force me to join had backfired spectacularly. They lost their credibility and respect in the neighborhood, and their aggressive tactics only served to unite the community against them. It was a victory for individual rights, and a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in, even when the odds are against you. Now, when I sit on my porch and look out over my property, I feel a sense of peace and satisfaction. I stood my ground and won, proving that no one has the right to bully or intimidate me into something I don't want. And as for the HOA board members, they learned a valuable lesson about the limits of their power and the strength of a determined homeowner. In the future, call up the police station and file a report of what happened. Then might be a good idea to file trespassing charge, so they will get a warning not to come back. Anytime you brandish a gun, you do need to immediately call the police, as the first story is believed, and people will call the police and say you did way worse. If you call first, it's a lot easier to be believed than you only brandished. Next time, let the police do their job and call them to kick people off your property. It's tons safer in the legal realm and in the body injury realm as well. There is a bunch of stories like you're on here, and the HOA people tend to enter your backyard and stuff as well.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.